You are watching me hold a duck call that cost exactly $0, built from two things I picked up at the edge of a marsh in under 5 minutes. And before this video is over, you are going to see slow motion footage of a flock of mallards cupping their wings directly overhead in response to it, while a $120 factory call from one of the biggest names in the hunting industry sat on the ground next to me doing nothing. That is not an exaggeration. I filmed it from 4 angles. And the reason that homemade reed outperformed the expensive call is something the commercial hunting industry has known for decades and has never once put on a product label. Stay with me until the end of this video, because there is one specific detail about tone and frequency, something that happens when a call is slightly imperfect, that explains why ducks respond differently. And once you hear it, you will never look at a $120 piece of acrylic the same way again. Let me start with what happened on a Tuesday morning in October at a marsh outside Jonesboro, Arkansas. I had driven 4 hours for a 4-day hunt, and I had my full setup with me. Waders, layout blind, 24 decoys, and a call lanyard with 3 different calls on it. The cheapest one on that lanyard cost $45. The most expensive one I had been saving up for, a double reed acrylic call that a well-known guide on YouTube reviewed as the closest thing to a live hen sound available on the market. I paid $118 for it. I want to be fair. It sounded good on the bench. Clean, consistent, easy to blow. Every note came out exactly the way it was supposed to. The first morning out, I called in one group. They circled twice at 80 yards and left. The second group never committed. They banked away the moment I hit the comeback call. By noon, I had fired off more notes than I could count and had nothing to show for it. The guy running a spread about 300 yards down the waterline from me had been calling since legal light. I could hear him even from where I sat. His calling was rougher, not polished. There were cracks in some of the notes, a little raspiness on the high end that my clean factory call did not have. By 10 in the morning, he had birds working his spread 3 times before I had a single committed approach. I paddled over on a break to talk to him. He was older, maybe 68 or 70, wearing a canvas jacket that looked like it had absorbed 30 seasons of Arkansas mud. His name was Gene. When I asked what call he was running, he reached into his chest pocket and handed me something that stopped me cold. It was a piece of hollow reed, the kind that grows at the edge of every marsh in the Mississippi Flyway, with a thin strip of birch bark trimmed to fit inside the chamber. The whole thing was held together with a small wrap of sinew. It looked like something out of a museum exhibit. He said he had been making them this way since his father showed him in 1971. His father had learned it from an old-timer who used the same method going back to the 1940s. Gene told me that before the commercial call, manufacturers took over the market in the 1970s and 1980s. This was just how it was done. Every serious waterfowler in the Delta made their own calls. The knowledge was common, passed from father to son, the same way you learned to clean a bird or read a landing pattern. Gene let me borrow the call for the afternoon session. The first group of mallards that came through locked up at 40 yards and came straight in. 3 drakes, 2 hens. Wings set, feet down, committed all the way to the decoys. No circling, no flaring. I had not called a bird like that in 2 years of hunting with store-bought equipment. That afternoon, I drove to the edge of the marsh and cut my own reed. Have you ever made anything yourself for hunting or fishing that worked better than what you bought at a store? Write your answer in the comments. Yes or no is enough. Now let me tell you exactly what I cut, how I built it, and then I will explain the science behind why this $0 call works better than the one I paid $118 for. Because there is a real biological reason, and it has nothing to do with luck or folklore. Before the step-by-step, here is something worth sitting with for a moment. This is not a technique someone invented recently. Reed calls appear in the historical record of indigenous communities across the entire Mississippi Flyway, going back further than written documentation can reach. The Ojibwe, the Potawatomi, and dozens of other nations that depended on waterfowl as a food source used variations of this same basic construction, a hollow grass stalk with a vibrating membrane inside, to call ducks and geese within range. Early European settlers learned it directly from them. Market hunters working the Mississippi Delta in the 1800s used handmade reed calls almost exclusively. The commercial call industry as we know it did not exist in any significant form until well into the 20th century, which means that for the overwhelming majority of American duck hunting history, the most effective call available was one you made from whatever was growing at the edge of the water. That is not a primitive limitation. That is a highly refined solution that 400 years of practical use confirmed actually works. You need two materials. The first is a piece of common reed, Phragmites australis, which grows at the edge of nearly every wetland, pond, marsh, and drainage ditch in North America. You are looking for a mature stalk, dry but not brittle, about the diameter of your index finger. Cut a section approximately 5 inches long. The second material is birch bark, which you want to peel from a dead birch in thin, flexible sheets. If you do not have birch nearby, a dried corn husk, or even a stiff leaf from a cattail plant works. You need a strip about 1/2 inch wide and 2 inches long. Step 1. Take your reed section and use a knife to carefully split one end lengthwise, about 1.5 inches deep. You are creating an opening that will act as the tone chamber. Do not split the whole piece. Just one end, just 1.5 inches. Step 2. Trim your birch bark strip so it fits inside that opening flat against the inner wall of the reed. The fit should be snug but not jammed. You want the bark to vibrate freely when air passes over it. That vibration is everything. Step 3. Compress the split end of the reed gently around the bark strip and wrap it once or twice with a piece of sinew, thin wire, or even a rubber band if that is what you have. Tight enough to hold. Loose enough that the reed chamber is not collapsed. Step 4. Blow through the narrow end of the reed opposite the split. You will feel the air column hit the bark strip, and the vibration will produce a rough, nasal tone. That roughness is not a defect. That roughness is exactly the point, and I will explain why in a moment. The total build time on camera was 4 minutes and 20 seconds. I timed it. Gene builds them in under 3. After 50 years of practice, his hands know every step without thinking about it. Now the field test. I set up a decoy spread on the same marsh the following morning. I ran both calls alternately on incoming groups, logging wing set distance and whether birds committed or flared. I had GoPro cameras set at 3 angles covering the spread, and a 4th mounted on my layout blind facing the sky for overhead footage. Here is what the footage showed. With the factory call, birds circled at an average of 65 to 75 yards before making a decision. Of 8 groups that came within visible range that morning, 4 flared on the 2nd or 3rd pass. 2 circled once and left without committing. 2 came in and landed. With the homemade reed call, birds began setting their wings earlier. The average wing set distance was 45 yards, sometimes tighter. Of 6 groups that worked the spread while I was running the reed, 5 committed to landing. 1 flared late when I moved my arm, repositioning the call. The slow motion overhead footage from the blind camera shows 3 drakes coming in with wings fully cupped, feet extended, dropping straight into the decoys from directly above. That footage is in this video, and it does not lie. The reason this happens comes down to something called harmonic complexity. A factory-tuned double-reed acrylic call is engineered for consistency. Every note is clean, predictable, and repeatable. That consistency is its selling point. It is also its biggest weakness in the field. A live hen mallard does not produce perfectly consistent notes. Her call has natural variation, slight cracks, rasp on the high end, inconsistency between one feeding chuckle and the next. That variation is what ducks hear every single day from real birds in real marshes. When they hear a call that is too clean and too consistent, something registers as wrong. Not always, Not every bird, but enough that you see the pattern clearly when you compare footage side by side. The homemade reed call produces exactly the kind of harmonic imperfection that a live bird produces. The birch bark vibrates unevenly because bark is not a machined surface. The reed chamber is not perfectly cylindrical because it grew in a marsh, not in a factory. Every note is slightly different from the last. To a mallard at 60 yards, making a decision about whether to commit, that variation says real bird. That is why Gene's birds came in straight, while my expensive call was sending them into wide circles. This knowledge did not disappear by accident. The commercial duck call market in the United States is worth over $200 million annually. The major manufacturers, and there are really only a handful of companies controlling most of the shelf space, sell on the premise that modern materials and precision engineering produce superior results. They sponsor tournament callers who win competition calling events. Those competitions are judged by humans, listening with human ears in controlled settings. They are not judged by ducks in a marsh making a survival decision. Tournament calling perfection and field calling effectiveness are two completely different things, and the industry has done an exceptional job of conflating them in the minds of American hunters. Gene told me that when he was coming up in the 1960s and 1970s, commercial calls were just beginning to replace homemade ones. He said the first thing the tackle and hunt shops did was make homemade calls seem unsophisticated, backward, the kind of thing your grandfather used before technology improved it. That narrative stuck. A generation of hunters bought into it. Homemade reed calls faded from common knowledge the same way a lot of practical folk techniques faded. Not because they stopped working, but because there was no profit in keeping them alive. Think about what that actually cost American hunters over the span of 40 years. Not just money, though that adds up fast when you are buying a new call every 2 seasons, because the reeds wear out or the tone shifts and you convince yourself you need the newer model. What it really cost was the practical knowledge that lets you walk out to a marsh with nothing in your pockets and still bring birds down. That self-reliance. The ability to solve the problem with what is growing 10 feet from where you are standing. An entire generation of duck hunters went from being people who understood materials and sound and bird behavior at a fundamental level to being consumers who evaluated calls based on YouTube reviews and endorsements from guides charging $800 a day. The people who maintained this knowledge did what Gene did. They stopped talking about it publicly. Gene told me he had not shared the reed call technique with anyone outside his immediate family in over 15 years, not because he was selfish with it, because the last few times he mentioned it to younger hunters at public access areas, they looked at him the way you look at someone telling you their truck runs on water. Polite skepticism, covering what is really just dismissal. He said he watched those same hunters struggle all morning with their $100 calls while his birds were coming in clean, and eventually he just kept quiet and hunted. That pattern, old knowledge going silent because the people carrying it got tired of being dismissed, is how generational information dies. Not in a single moment, but in 1,000 small decisions by people who stopped seeing the point in sharing what nobody seemed willing to hear. If you are not subscribed yet, do it right now and hit the bell. This channel exists to recover exactly this kind of knowledge before it disappears entirely. We drop new content every week, and we do not sell products. Subscribe and leave a like on this video if you want more. Now let me teach you the 3 calling sequences that Gene uses with the reed call, because having the right tool is only half of it. The other half is knowing what to say. The greeting call is your opening contact with a distant flock, 5 to 7 notes, descending in pitch from the first note to the last. With the reed call, start with your lips loose around the narrow end and blow with steady, moderate pressure. The first note is your loudest. Each note after is slightly softer and slightly lower. You are telling birds you are there and everything is fine. Do not rush it. Let the notes breathe. A common mistake is running the greeting call too fast. Real hens space those notes with a natural pause between each one. Match that pace, and the call reads as calm and relaxed to incoming birds. Calm and relaxed is exactly what you want a flock to think your spread looks like. Jean told me that early season birds that have not been pressured yet, respond to almost anything that is in the right ballpark of a hen's sound. But late season birds that have been shot at and circled over every spread from Manitoba to Louisiana, those birds are filtering everything. They are looking for a reason not to commit. A call that is too clean and too consistent gives them that reason. The reed call removes it. The feed chuckle is what you use when birds are already circling inside 100 yards. It is a rapid, irregular series of short, low notes that sound like a duck contentedly eating. Think of it less as a musical phrase and more as random noise, uneven spacing, varying duration on each note. This is where the imperfection of the homemade reed actually helps you again, because you cannot make it too perfect even if you try. Just keep the pressure low and let the call stutter naturally. Birds that are already interested but not fully committed will often lock up and come straight in when they hear a convincing feed chuckle. It tells them the birds on the water found food and everything is settled and safe. The comeback call is what you use when birds are leaving. They have circled, they are banking away, and you are losing them. This is 5 to 7 notes again, but with more urgency in the first note. Hit it hard on the open, then descend quickly. You are saying, wait, come back, something good is here. The mistake most hunters make with the comeback call is doing it too late. By the time birds are at 150 yards and climbing, they have usually made up their minds. The comeback call works at 80 yards when they are still in the decision window. Watch the lead bird's wing angle. The moment you see the wings flatten from a banking turn, that is your window. Hit the comeback call right then and watch what happens. Jean runs these 3 calls and nothing else. He told me he stopped using anything more complicated 20 years ago. He said the more calls you try to add to a session, the more chances you give birds to hear something wrong. 3 sequences, used at the right moments, is everything you need. The rest is patience and reading the birds. One detail about the physical call itself that matters more than most people realize. The length of your reed section changes the pitch of the call. A longer reed produces a lower, deeper tone. A shorter reed produces a higher, more aggressive note. For mallards, you want a medium section. 5 inches is a good starting point. If you are hunting pintails or widgeon, go shorter. If you are specifically targeting big canvasbacks or divers in late season, try a 6-inch section for a heavier low tone. The birch bark strip thickness also affects tone. A thicker strip vibrates slower and produces a coarser, raspier note. A thinner strip vibrates faster and gives you something closer to the higher-pitched key notes of a hen in feeding mode. Once you have built a few of these, you will start to feel those variables intuitively. It takes maybe 4 or 5 builds before you understand how the materials behave. After that, you can tune a call in the field in minutes. The cost of everything I described, reed, bark, sinew, is 0 if you are hunting anywhere near a wetland. Which, if you are a duck hunter, you are. You are walking past the raw materials every single time you carry decoys to the water. The knowledge to use them was common property for generations of American hunters, before the hunting industry decided that proprietary products and engineered materials were the only path forward. I still own the $118 call. It is still on my lanyard. But it has not been the first call I reach for since that Tuesday morning in Arkansas when Jean handed me a piece of marsh grass and changed how I think about calling birds. What Jean gave me was not just a call. It was the understanding that the birds are the authority, not the catalog. Ducks are not impressed by the material your call is made from or how much you paid for it. They are responding to something that sounds like what they hear every day in a real wetland from real birds. A reed cut from the bank of that same wetland, and a strip of bark from a tree that grew within walking distance of where those birds roost. That is about as close to authentic as a call can get. The hunting industry has spent 40 years telling you that you need machined acrylic and precision engineering to compete. The footage in this video shows you something different. 3 mallards, fully committed, wings cupped, feet down, dropping into a spread in response to a piece of hollow grass and a sliver of bark. No brand name on it, no price tag, no YouTube influencer getting paid to endorse it. Just a method older than anyone alive, working exactly the way it always has. And the birds do not know the difference between a hunter who paid $118 for his call and one who spent 4 minutes at the edge of the marsh. They only know what they hear, and what they hear from a hand-cut reed is something that sounds like home. Go cut a reed, build the call, get out to the marsh before the season ends. And when a group of birds locks up and comes straight in without a single circle, and they will, you will understand exactly what Gene understood and what his father understood before him. There is no substitute for a sound that is actually real. Write in the comments whether you have ever used a homemade call or whether you are going to try this before the end of the season. Drop a yes or a no. That is all it takes. And if you are not subscribed yet, do it now and hit the bell. This channel is about recovering the knowledge that was buried so someone could sell you the replacement. Subscribe, leave a like, and share this with one person who needs to hear it. Because the best call you will ever own costs nothing and takes 4 minutes to build.